Hi, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. It is Friday, October 5th, 2012. Well, President Obama caught a break today, which I suppose is very fortuitous for the president, given his debate performance on Wednesday. The official unemployment rate actually dropped all the way down to 7.8%. Believe it or not, that's the lowest of the Obama presidency. In fact, it's the first time since January of 2009 that the unemployment rate has actually been below 8%. Now, how did this happen? Is it because, we created all sorts of jobs? Well, I don't think so. If you look at the number of jobs that were created in the month of November, it was only 114,000. I mean, that normally isn't even enough to reduce the unemployment rate at all. I mean, 1/10. Sometimes the unemployment rate would actually go up with such pathetic job creation. Instead, it dropped all the way down to 7.8%. In fact, of the 114,000 jobs that were created, 10,000 of them were from government. And that's on top of 45,000 government jobs that were created in the prior month. In contrast, we lost 16,000 manufacturing jobs in September, and that's on top of the 22,000 manufacturing jobs we lost in August. In other words, we're losing the jobs that we need, and we're gaining the jobs that we don't. We don't need more people working for the government. After all, the private sector is forced to pay their salaries. These are not the productive jobs that make us richer. They are the non-productive jobs that make us poorer. They add to the tax burden, and they add to the trade deficit because now we have more government workers collecting paychecks, but they're not making stuff, so we just have more imbalances in the economy. And ultimately, when the economy restructures, a lot of these jobs are going to be lost. Well, if that's the case, how did the unemployment rate manage to fall so precipitously? Well, they have another survey. It's a household survey. It's a telephone survey. And according to that survey, 873,000 jobs were created almost by magic last month. Now, this is the most jobs that this household survey has tracked in over 30 years. The last time the number was this big was in 1983, when we were coming out of that recession with much faster economic growth. Now, the government also said that 2/3 of those jobs were part-time jobs. Now, maybe if these numbers are real, I have a hunch that maybe what happened is a lot of people who have been collecting extended unemployment benefits for 99 weeks, a lot of those benefits expired recently. And so maybe some of the people who are living off of unemployment finally had the impetus to go out and get a job because they weren't getting the unemployment money anymore. So they actually looked for a job, and the best job they could find was a part-time job because, after all, the economy is lousy. It's not growing. It's not really creating jobs, but maybe they got some part-time jobs, and that's probably what's brought the unemployment rate down, is you've got more people now working part-time, but they'd probably rather have full-time jobs. In fact, the U6 unemployment rate really was unchanged. It's still just a hair under 15%. That's really what the unemployment rate is, because when you count all the people who are taking these part-time jobs but really want full-time jobs, or the people that have thrown in the towel and who aren't even looking because they're so discouraged, that rate didn't drop at all. But of course, President Obama is going to use this number, this 7.8% number, to try to compensate for his poor debate performance and convince the American public, if they just give him 4 more years, that we're now finally going in the right direction and that we're making some headway. Now, I have no idea what kind of revisions we're likely to get after the election, but to me, it doesn't really pass the smell test that we got such robust job creation as indicated by this household survey, a number that we haven't seen the likes of in 30 years. To me, I don't know. I'm just a little bit suspicious. It seems a little convenient to me that the Labor Department came up with these numbers so close to the November election. In fact, if you go and look at the GDP numbers that we got last week, we actually revised down second quarter growth from the original estimate of 1.7% all the way down to 1.3%. The economy is barely growing. So how is it possible that we've created all these jobs to bring the unemployment rate down to 7.8% when the economy is barely growing. In fact, in reality, I think it's contracting. If you look at second quarter GDP, the way the government derived that 1.3% growth rate is they deflated the nominal GDP. Nominal GDP was 2.9, and the government said that annual inflation is running at 1.6. So if we only have inflation of 1.6, then we had 1.3% economic growth. Well, what if inflation isn't 1.6? What if the government has underestimated it? What if inflation is 3%, which I think is more believable than 1.6? In fact, I think it's higher than 3%. But the bottom line is, if it's 3%, then the economy contracted last quarter. It didn't grow at all. And of course, if the economy is contracting, where are the jobs coming from? In fact, to me, it makes a lot more sense that the economy is contracting than actually expanding. The government is trying to create the illusion of a growing economy by debasing the currency, creating inflation, and then underreporting it. But in the real world, people can realize that this fairy tale about a lack of inflation and economic growth isn't really there, as are probably a lot of these jobs that somehow came into existence conveniently close to the elections. Now, there actually is one more jobs report before the November election, but a lot of people would have already voted by then, because you have a lot of people who are actually voting early, and so this is the last number they're going to get. You know, in fact, the manipulation doesn't end there. I read an article that President Obama was actually encouraging, and of course, you know, when the government encourages, it's, you know, they have a sneaky way of doing it, so it makes it look like they're not asking you to do something. But apparently, the Obama administration is encouraging defense contractors not to send out pink slips until after the election. Apparently, there's a rule that when they're letting people go, they have to give them a 60-day notice, and because of the spending cuts that are supposedly going to go into effect January 1st, some of these companies are going to have to lay people off, and they have to send out a 60-day notice of their intention to do that. And Obama is basically using the power of the presidency to encourage these people, these companies, not to do it, and he's even bribing them. He's basically offering to pay any fees that they might otherwise occur. With whose money? I mean, this has got to be illegal. How can the president do this? I mean, isn't this some kind of, you know, election tampering? I mean, how could you use the office of the presidency to rig the election, to try to put pressure on companies that do business with the government who might be fearful of losing those contracts, to not send out a notice that they're legally required to send out, and then offer to pay their penalties using what, tax dollars? I mean, this has got to be illegal. I can't even understand why this isn't a bigger issue. But I guess, you know, he really is Teflon when it comes to the media. Whatever he wants to do, nobody is questioning it. In reaction to today's better than expected jobs data, you had a small rally in the dollar and a sell-off in gold, although by the end of the day, gold was only down about $10. But on the week, both gold and silver were very strong, and the dollar was quite weak. In fact, the charts are breaking down for the dollar. Gold and silver are breaking out. And if anybody believed that this news was somehow, you know, bullish for the dollar and bearish for metals, on the idea that, hey, a falling unemployment rate means we might not get as much QE as we thought, the Fed's not going to have to print as much money to bring down the unemployment rate because it's already falling, that's not true. This was a weak jobs report. Beneath the headline lay a very weak report. It's going to get weaker. I think the unemployment rate will be back up above 8% relatively quickly. And of course, one of the main reasons it's even below 8% at all, well, A, they don't report, you know, all the people who are discouraged and all the people who are part-time, but record numbers of Americans are no longer in the labor force at all. They either gone on Social Security disability. We've got the fewest people in the labor force, or at least labor force participation is the lowest since 1971. And if you don't count women, if you just count adult males, it's the lowest since the Second World War. So the real reason that Obama has been able to shrink the rate of unemployment, it's not because he's created jobs for the unemployed. He's destroyed the incentives for people to even look for work. They're so disgusted that they've exited the labor force completely, and therefore, even though they're not working, they're not counted as being unemployed, which is another reason that I find the economic growth statistics unbelievable. How can the economy be growing if we have millions of Americans that are no longer participating in growing it? They're not working, they're not being productive, they're simply living off the rest of us. I don't think the people who are still working are so much more productive that they're picking up the slack for the millions of people who are now idle in this economy. So to me, it's all a bunch of statistics. It's all a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And I think the gold traders, the currency traders are figuring this out. And based on the technicals right now and based on the fundamentals of QE3 and what's going on, I think that we could see a very, very weak dollar between now and the end of the year. And of course, 2013 could be an extraordinarily weak year for the dollar. The flip side for gold and silver, looking strong from now till year end and probably even stronger in 2013. And I don't even think it matters who wins the election, whether it's Obama or whether it's Mitt Romney. In fact, if you watched Wednesday's debates, the difference between the two candidates has narrowed considerably. I mean, after all, as a candidate, Mitt Romney was promising to repeal Obamacare. But what we didn't realize is that he wanted to repeal Obamacare so that he can replace it with Romneycare. I mean, there's really not much difference between what Romney wants to do and what the president has already done. Yet Mitt Romney wants to repeal the president's version of, government health care and just replace it with something that's slightly different, but that has his name on it. In fact, Mitt Romney agreed with President Obama that we should have no cuts to Social Security, that we should have no cuts to Medicare. Mitt Romney wants to increase spending on defense despite the fact that we're broke. In fact, the only federal employee that Mitt Romney indicated that he would lay off is Big Bird. I mean, he actually went out of his way to say he didn't want to fire anybody. In fact, he also said he didn't want to cut any money that the federal government spends on education. I mean, what is he going to cut? I mean, even if he wanted to cut something, it would pale in comparison to the things that he wants to expand. So even if we get Mitt Romney, the deficit train isn't going to stop running. Government is going to keep on growing. It's going to keep on spending. It's even going to keep on regulating. I mean, Mitt Romney even professed his love of regulations during the debate. He basically said, you got to have regulations. Regulations are great. I mean, basically, you can't have a free market unless the government controls it. Romney actually gave an example of where he thinks regulation is necessary. He said, after all, we can't let somebody run a bank out of their garage. Well, why not? Why can't you run a bank out of a garage? I mean, first of all, at least we know one thing. If somebody runs a bank out of a garage, it's not going to be too big to fail. So at least as a taxpayer, I don't have to worry about it. I mean, and if somebody knows the bank's in a garage and they want to deposit their money there, I mean, hey, more power to them. I mean, after all, what does Mitt Romney think is going to happen? If somebody runs a bank out of their garage, maybe they'll be so stupid they'll invest in subprime mortgages. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that what the big banks did? In fact, I think if we had more banks run out of garages and fewer banks run on Wall Street or in New York, we'd probably have a sounder banking system. We wouldn't have had all these crazy loans, and certainly the taxpayer wouldn't be on the hook. And when it comes to starting a business in a garage, I mean, why can't you? I mean, after all, I'm going to give you a few examples of some companies that were started in a garage. Now, maybe in a Mitt Romney economy, maybe that wouldn't be possible. Maybe it's just not banks that he doesn't think should be run out of garages. Maybe there's all sorts of companies that Mitt Romney doesn't want people to run out of their garage. But here's some examples. Apple Computer, started in a garage. Amazon, Google, Hewlett-Packard, all started in somebody's garage. Walt Disney, started in a garage. Mattel was started in a garage. Even Harley-Davidson, although that might make sense, that was started in a garage. And there are other companies. So if you can start tech companies, if you can start entertainment companies, if you can start motorcycle companies, toy companies in a garage, why can't you start a bank? After all, is banking so complicated? In fact, I think we've overcomplicated it. I think if we had sounder banking practices, more simpler banking, maybe we'd have a more solid financial system. But the bottom line is Mitt Romney wants more government regulations. He just wants to be the one to write them. He opposes the regulations that Obama implements, although not even all of them now, but he would just rather be in charge of the regulation than Obama. So what are we going to get even if Mitt Romney wins? And I still don't think that that's necessarily likely. Yes, he did, better than Obama. I hate to say Romney won the debate, so let's just say that Obama lost the debate. Maybe that's a more accurate description. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to overcome the lead that Obama enjoys, a month before the election. But even if he comes from behind and wins, is anything going to change? No. Right? We're not going to have any different policies in a Romney administration than we have in an Obama administration. It's not going to have an impact on the trajectory of the economy. The only person in the race that might make a difference wasn't on that stage, and that was Gary Johnson on the Republican, on the Libertarian line. The only difference, in my opinion, you get with Romney is when it hits the fan and we go over the real cliff, when we have a sovereign debt crisis, when we have a currency crisis, and things really fall apart. And now we have a real choice to make, right? Do we go all in on socialism and become a complete command economy? Or do we recognize government's role in this disaster and actually go back to free markets, to have a real market-based economy with a much smaller government, fewer regulations, less government spending, lower taxes, all that stuff? And I think that in that environment, Romney just may, live up to expectations. He's not going to be the Romney that was in that debate with Obama. There is a chance that under that scenario, he might actually embrace free market principles, because somewhere beneath the surface, he might actually believe them. But for political reasons, he doesn't want to acknowledge it. And it's my experience, and there are people out there that think, well, maybe Romney is just saying what he has to say to get elected, and then once he is elected, well, then he'll be more free market oriented. There's just no historical precedent for that. In fact, it's the opposite. Generally, people are even more big government after they get elected than when they campaign. They might talk the talk when it comes to shrinking government when they're actually campaigning for a job, but once they become part of government and they're in Washington, they tend to grow it. So I wouldn't be looking for that type of conversion from Mitt Romney. I don't think he's going to do that unless he's forced to, unless the economy collapses and he's not looking at re-election regardless, and he's really forced by circumstances to do the right thing. Because if he's not forced to do it, he's going to keep doing the wrong thing for political reasons. And of course, Obama, we know he's never going to do the right thing. In fact, Obama is waiting for the country to fail so he can blame it on capitalism, even if government caused it, because he's not a capitalist, he's more of a socialist, and he wants to remake the American economy following that ideology. He wants to follow Karl Marx. He doesn't want to follow Adam Smith. In fact, one of the things that the president said in the debate that was very disturbing when he talked about wanting to ask the wealthy to pay more taxes. And of course, he never asked them. Basically, it's pay more taxes or else, right? We're going to throw you in jail. The government doesn't ask, it commands. But when he said he wants to ask the wealthy to pay more taxes, he said that people who are doing well, because they live in such a great country, should give back a little bit more. He attributed their doing well to the circumstances of living in a great country. Well, what about they're doing well because they deserve it? They worked hard, right? They're smart. They're creative. They put in long hours, right? How about they earned their wealth? Not that, hey, they just got lucky, they caught a break, they happen to live in this good country and they got rich. If that's the case, why isn't everybody rich? If all you have to do is live in America to get rich, then why is anybody poor? Maybe the people who have succeeded have done something to merit that success. And of course, from my perspective, most people that I know who achieved success in America did so despite the government, not because of it. They were overcoming all the obstacles and barriers that government put in their path. Government didn't help them. Government was a hindrance. And of course, when you're saying that they have to give back by paying more taxes, overlooks the fact that in accumulating their wealth, they contributed more to society than what they contribute by paying taxes. After all, when you get rich in America, How do you do that? How do you get rich? You figure out a way to satisfy the desires and the needs of consumers, your customers. You enrich people's lives by providing them with goods and services that they value more than the money they use to pay for it. And in the process, you create jobs. So as an entrepreneur, you enrich society by combining resources and creating value. Maybe you combine $1 worth of resources and you create $1.50 worth of value, and some of it becomes your profit, but that is what benefits society. Not the fact that they pay taxes to the government and the government blows the money. In fact, the more money that we leave in the hands of the entrepreneurs that earned it, the stronger the economy is going to be. The more wealth we're going to create, the higher our standards of living are going to be, the more jobs that are going to be created in the process. The last thing you want to do is take money out of the hands of hardworking entrepreneurs who might otherwise have invested it in growing the economy and instead send it to Washington where the bureaucrats can squander it on things like Solyndra. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for today. Don't forget, you can listen to more of my insights and analysis on a daily basis, weekdays anyway, from 10 a.m. to noon on schiffradio.com. And if you can't listen live, just go to schiffradio.com at any point in the day and you can listen to the delayed show that we loop for 24 hours. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.